The Trophies of Lies, a Lost Compass. Natalie sat on a creaky wooden chair in their spacious kitchen, her hands trembling. Before her, on the light oak table, lay Mark's phone, like a trophy from an invisible battlefield. The screen lit up her face with a cold, bluish light, and only one question echoed in her head. How? How could she have been so blind? The years of their marriage seemed like a solid foundation, built on mutual trust and love. They had met in college, where Natalie studied art and Mark studied business. He had always been her reliable lighthouse, her anchor in the stormy sea of life. He supported her through the toughest times, believed in her talent when she doubted herself, and together they built the family she had always dreamed of. Now, that foundation was cracking. It all started with little things she initially attributed to stress or tiredness. His phone was always near him, as if it were an extension of his arm. If he left it on the table, it was always face down. When a message came in, he would grab it so quickly, as if it were a matter of life and death. Natalie had seen him smiling while reading something on the screen, but as soon as she glanced over his shoulder, his face would turn serious, and he would hide the phone. Finally, her intuition, which Mark had so long forced her to doubt, won. While he was in the shower, she took the phone. Her heart was pounding, but she knew she had to do it. She found messages that made her blood run cold. Flirting, suggestive jokes, all directed at someone named Amber. The most awful was the message he sent twice, as if testing her reaction. "Don't be touching my product now." Natalie knew this was not just a set of words, but part of a game between him and Amber. She saw how Amber replied, "Already did." These words, like a cold shower, washed away all his excuses, which he had so skillfully delivered that she began to doubt her own sanity. He hadn't just made a mistake, he had consciously chosen this path. The next morning, Natalie called her best friend Allison. Allison had always been her rock. She worked as a lawyer and knew how to think logically, unlike Natalie, who always relied on emotions. "I found the messages, Al. He's cheating," Natalie whispered into the phone. There was a long pause. "What are you going to do?" Allison finally asked. "I don't know. I need proof because I know he'll deny everything. I'm going to dig." Natalie felt her anger transform into cold determination. She became a detective in her own life. She started with the simple stuff, his phone and computer. She found deleted messages and browser history. Mark was careful, but he didn't clean up every trace. Natalie found even more messages where he said he would be working late or fixing the third shift, even though that shift had been running smoothly for ages. Every time he told her about delays at work, Natalie now knew he was lying. The strangest clues Natalie found were in his Google Maps. He claimed he had to take long trips to solve issues with suppliers. One day he said he was going to a meeting in a nearby town, but instead Natalie saw that he drove 20 minutes in the wrong direction, stopped at a gas station, and immediately returned. Then, after returning to his town, he stopped at another gas station to refuel again. On the way, he stopped at the house where his friend lived, whom he constantly visited, sent money to, and ordered food for. These weren't just random meetings. It was a well-established secret life he was living behind her back. As Natalie dug into his lies, she started noticing other, more obvious things. His behavior towards her changed drastically. He became irritable, nitpicking every little thing, blaming her for everything that went wrong. She remembered how he would enter the house after a phone call, and his cheerful mood would immediately turn sullen. He became indifferent in their intimate life. She recalled how, after sex, he would immediately turn away and fall asleep, which was completely unlike him. Her friend, Alex, who worked with Mark, once called her to discuss work matters. In the conversation, he mentioned that Mark had been acting strangely lately, always hiding in his office to talk to someone. This only confirmed Natalie's suspicions. She realized that Mark wasn't just cheating, he was living a double life. Natalie started collecting physical evidence like a trophy hunter. In his car, she found newborn diapers, McDonald's toys, and a card from the gaming center, even though their child had long outgrown all of these things. In her hallway, she found a handmade bead bracelet. Under her bed, a diamond ring. In her work things, which he brought home when he started working remotely, she found a gray rhinestone mask and earbuds. But the most horrifying find was a hair tie with blonde hair in his office. Natalie and their daughter both have dark hair, and there hadn't been a blonde person in their house for years. The last straw for Natalie was the scratches on his back. She asked him about them, and he tried to make excuses saying they were from the boxes in the warehouse, but Natalie knew that wasn't true. She knew these scratches were marks of passion. She couldn't take it anymore. She called Allison, and they agreed to meet. Natalie showed her all the evidence she had collected, and Allison advised her to get a lawyer. "You have to be strong, Nat." Allison hugged her. "You don't deserve this." Natalie returned home. Mark was sitting in the living room watching TV. His face was relaxed. He suspected nothing. Natalie entered the room, and her gaze fell on his phone, which lay on the table, face down. He didn't know that her intuition was stronger than his lies. She decided it was time to lay all her cards on the table. "We need to talk," she said. He looked at her, and his face showed annoyance. "What is it?" he asked. "You're cheating on me, Mark. I know everything." And on the table, next to his phone, she placed a bag of evidence. He tried to make excuses, but this time Natalie didn't let him. She showed him all the proof. His face turned white, and he hung his head. "Why?" she whispered. But Mark said nothing. A few weeks later, Natalie and Mark began the divorce process. Natalie realized she was no longer a victim. She had become a victor. She was free and no longer dependent on his lies. Her path was full of pain, but she knew that in the end, she would find her own way to happiness. A love built on sand. The early months of the year for Alex, a quiet film studies major at a small liberal arts college in Ohio, were marked by the familiar rhythm of campus life. Days blurred between morning lectures in dimly lit halls and late nights at the campus library, fueled by stale coffee and the hope of a passing grade. He was a creature of habit, finding comfort in the predictable ebb and flow of his routine, which included a part-time gig at The Daily Grind, a cozy coffee shop known for its mismatched mugs and eclectic soundtrack. He'd never been one for grand gestures or loud declarations. His world was a series of small, meaningful moments. That's why his sudden and all-consuming fascination with Jessica, a girl he'd shared 2 years of classes with but had never spoken to, was so entirely out of character. It was a cold March morning when their orbits finally aligned. Alex was leaving his history class, a stack of books precariously balanced in his arms, when he stumbled. The books scattered across the slick linoleum floor, and he braced himself for the usual awkward apologies. Instead, a hand, small and surprisingly warm, was there to help. It was Jessica. She didn't say much, just a soft smile and a gentle shrug as she helped him gather his things. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, held a kind of knowing depth that instantly drew him in. From that day on, their brief interactions grew longer, filled with shared jokes about their professors and conversations that stretched far beyond the classroom. He found himself captivated by her wit, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, and how she saw the world with a cynical but strangely optimistic perspective. The quiet observer was suddenly an active participant, and before he knew it, he was completely head over heels. On April 24th, after weeks of late-night talks on the phone and long walks through the blossoming campus quad, Alex knew he had to tell her how he felt. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the evening sky was a wash of lavender and gold as he confessed everything. He spoke of the sleepless nights he'd spent thinking about her and the way she had unknowingly shifted his entire world. Her response was a breathless whisper, a me too that felt more like a promise than a simple phrase. The next few weeks were a dream. Their dates were a testament to their newfound connection. They explored hidden trails in the nearby state park, spent hours people watching at the bustling farmers market, and shared their first kiss in the forgotten corner of the college basement, a place that smelled of old paper and dust, where the light from a single window cast long, dancing shadows. Alex was walking on air. She even wrote him a love letter, a single piece of notebook paper filled with her sprawling script, and every word felt like a symphony. He kept it folded carefully in his wallet, pulling it out in quiet moments to reread the lines that spoke of a future he was finally starting to believe in. Then came the summer. The long, lazy days that promised endless time together started with a flourish of digital romance. Jessica's face would pop up on his phone screen 5 or more times a day, her voice a constant presence in his life. Their conversations were filled with inside jokes, dreams of future trips, and the kind of intimate details that only exist between two people who are deeply, truly falling for each other. But as the weeks of June bled into July, the calls became less frequent. The laughter was replaced by hurried, clipped sentences, and her enthusiastic, "I miss you," morphed into a polite, distant, "talk to you later." Alex felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He tried to rationalize her changing behavior, telling himself that maybe it was just her first serious relationship and she was trying to navigate the new territory. But deep down, he knew something was off. The feeling was a constant low hum of dread, an unsettling sense of things being out of his control. The dam broke on a humid evening in late July. A simple question from Alex about her plans for the weekend led to an awkward silence, followed by her hushed confession. She had a boyfriend. A boyfriend of 7 years, she explained, her voice barely a whisper. The world tilted on its axis for Alex. He felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. How could this be? The walks, the kisses, the love letter? Was it all a lie? He was on the verge of hanging up, of cutting all ties, but then came her next set of words, delivered with a startling mix of sincerity and desperation. "I have never loved someone this much." Those words, so potent and so heartbreakingly contradictory, held him captive. He stayed not because it was easy, but because the thought of losing her, of walking away from the one person who had made him feel alive, was unbearable. For over a month, he existed in a state of agonizing limbo. He watched her online status, seeing her active at the same time as the other guy. He saw her lie about her 3 a.m. calls, the same kind of calls he wished she would make to him. The painful realization that she was giving him the crumbs of her affection while the other guy got the whole meal was a poison that ate away at him. He wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but he was paralyzed by the fear of losing even the little she was willing to give him. The final act of this tragic play began with a simple request. Jessica, seemingly tired of the emotional tightrope they were walking, asked him to act like just simple friends. The request felt like a physical blow. He knew he couldn't do it. He couldn't go back to pretending they were strangers. The tension reached its boiling point 2 days ago. He was trying to talk to her, to understand why she was so distant and cold. He reached for her hand, a simple gesture of comfort, but she recoiled, as if burned. She pushed him away, a sharp slap against his hand, and spat out, "You're so irritating." The words were a physical punch to the gut. All the lies, the pain, the deception, it all condensed into that moment. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked away. He walked home, the city lights blurring into a watery haze, and for the first time in months, he felt a strange sense of clarity. Once in his room, he sat down and wrote. He wrote not a simple text, but 4 long, painful paragraphs, a final goodbye to the girl he had loved and lost. It had been almost 48 hours since he had sent that message, and the silence was deafening, but it was also a kind of peace. He had finally untangled himself from a web of deceit, and even though his heart was shattered, he knew he had finally found his way back to himself. The perfect life, the perfect nightmare. In the oppressive haze of a summer evening, I sat on the couch while Jacob, my boyfriend, leaned over me again, trying to kiss me. His lips, so desired just a few days ago, now felt defiled. I turned my head away and my heart clenched with disgust. "No, Jake, not now," I mumbled, trying to suppress the rising nausea. I looked at him and all I saw was not his face, but the ghost of another woman. And all I heard were not his words, but snippets of conversations recorded by the hidden app on his phone. This app had become my personal hell, my guide into a world where Jacob was a monster, and I was his victim. Our meeting seemed like a gift from fate. After my ex-boyfriend of nearly 3 years turned out to be a married man with a family, I was broken. My trusted man was shattered, and my heart had turned into a shard of ice. But then Jacob appeared, attentive, caring, patient. He knew about my trauma and seemed to understand me like no one else. He promised he would never hurt me, never betray me. His words were a balm for my wounded soul. I started believing in love and happiness again. But over time, something changed. There were long delays at work, strange phone calls he would take in another room, and a tense silence whenever I asked what was going on. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I desperately clung to hope. I didn't want to believe that this could happen again. I tried to convince myself that my paranoia was just an echo of past trauma, but my intuition wouldn't be silenced. It whispered that Jacob was lying. When my direct questions hit a wall of denial, I made a desperate decision. I installed a hidden app on his phone. I was ashamed, but the fear of being deceived again was stronger. I had no idea how much I would regret it. I started the recording when he left the house and went into the kitchen to make some tea. His voice, so familiar, so dear, I heard him talking to someone and laughing. Suddenly, his laughter turned into anger, and then into a desperate pain scream. "Fudge, fudge, fudge! What the heck is wrong with me?" I stopped, holding my breath, and pressed the phone to my ear. The next second, I heard him call another girl and tell her she could come and pick him up. I collapsed into a chair, pressing my hand to my mouth to keep from screaming. Sounds came through the receiver that made me freeze. I heard her tell him, "You'll be okay, just close your eyes." Then sloshing sounds, and his voice full of bliss. The world around me crumbled. Now he's sitting next to me on the couch again. He looks at me with his big blue eyes, and I'm trying to understand who this person is. Is he a monster who deliberately hurt me knowing about my history? Or is he himself a victim of some internal struggle, some pain I know nothing of? I see his hands, which were holding me just yesterday, now caressing another. I remember how we sat in the park and he said that I was his destiny. How could he lie like that? Why am I still letting him be here? I want to scream at him to leave, but I can't utter a single word. My heart, which so recently loved him so much, is now tearing apart from pain and disgust. But even in this chaos, I realize I need to do something. I cannot let his betrayal define my future. The illusion of paradise. Natalie never thought she'd have to ask herself this question. She was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by plush toys bought for their 3 children, staring at her phone screen. A message from an unknown woman read, "I know your husband promised me a castle, but he can't even take me out to dinner." Natalie's heart froze. A castle? What on earth was she talking about? Natalie and Michael had been together for almost a decade. They had been through everything from student debt to sleepless nights with newborns. Michael had always been dependable and caring. He worked as an engineer, and Natalie was an interior designer. Together, they managed their mortgage. Michael often said, "We're a team, honey. We can handle anything." His words felt like the strongest wall. And now, that wall had a crack in it. At first, Natalie discovered strange hotel bills. Then she found her husband's account on a website where people sell their services. It turned out he wanted to create an OnlyFans to earn some extra money. But his business plan had gone too far. He had been communicating with 4 women, but one of them, named Emma, became a real problem. Michael was a master of a double game. He made Emma incredible promises. "How many animals do you want on a farm? I can't wait to put you in a beautiful mansion one day." He painted pictures of a future that made her heart beat faster. Emma fell so deeply in love that she stopped charging for her services. She was willing to drive down for free just to spend time with him. Natalie felt her world crumble. She couldn't understand how he could say those things without meaning a word. She reread their old messages, in which Michael wrote about how they would grow old together. How could he lie like that? Natalie felt like she was in a fog. She remembered them choosing wallpaper for the nursery while Michael was probably promising Emma a mansion. Every detail of their shared life, which seemed so real, was now falling apart. She noticed that he had become withdrawn, working late more often. He explained it was to earn more so their family wouldn't lack for anything. Natalie believed him, but deep down, something told her it wasn't true. Natalie couldn't sleep. She would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, imagining her husband driving to a hotel with another woman. She imagined him promising her the stars, and then after an hour or 2, leaving her alone with 100 excuses. She replayed their life together in her mind, trying to find any clues. Had they always been there? Those short absences, that coldness in his eyes after he came back from work? Or had she just not wanted to see them? Natalie decided to talk to Emma. She found her on social media and messaged her. Emma, stunned, replied. They exchanged messages all night. Natalie learned that Michael never took Emma out to dinner, never walked with her, never spent the whole day with him. Their meetings lasted no more than an hour and a half and were all about sex. After that, Michael would disappear, citing urgent business or needing to get home. He never spent the night. Talking to Emma, Natalie realized that Michael had said the same things to this woman that he had said to her when they first met. He used the same tricks, the same promises. Natalie didn't know which was more painful, that he had cheated or that he had used her as a template to deceive another woman. She felt like her life was a complete lie. That night when Michael returned home, he immediately felt that something was wrong. Natalie was sitting on the same sofa, but there wasn't a single tear on her face. Her eyes were empty and cold. She held out her phone to him, with the message exchange with Emma open. "Did you feel guilty?" she whispered. Michael couldn't utter a word. His face turned pale and his hands began to tremble. He fell to his knees and begged. He said it was a mistake, that he was foolish, that he never wanted to hurt her. He said he felt terribly guilty every time he left Emma, but kept going back to her. Michael's words sounded fake. Natalie looked at him and felt like she was looking at a complete stranger. He spoke of guilt, but his actions said otherwise. If he truly felt guilty, wouldn't he have stopped? Wouldn't he have thought about his children? At that moment, Natalie realized that his guilt was just another lie he told himself to justify his actions. Natalie took her phone and walked out of the house, leaving Michael alone in the living room. She drove to her sister's house, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "I need time to think. Don't look for me." Natalie knew she had a long and difficult road ahead, but she also knew that her life would never be the same. Her marriage, which had seemed like such a strong fortress, turned out to be just an illusion built on sand. Michael, who had promised her the world, had destroyed hers.
A loyalty betrayed. Imagine you've been with someone for almost a decade. 9 years of love, trust, and shared memories. Then, in a single moment, your entire world is turned upside down because of a few words you accidentally find on your partner's phone. A single message that shattered everything. The story of Jake and Sarah began in 2015 in school corridors, where they were part of the same friend group. He was a shy and quiet guy, and she was cheerful and outgoing. At first, they just hung out with their friends, but soon Sarah began to show interest in him, and one day she mustered the courage and asked him out. Jake, who also had feelings for her, said yes. Their relationship developed slowly but surely, and by 2021, they had become very serious. Their families knew each other, and everyone considered Sarah part of Jake's extended family. In the same year, Sarah started attending some classes where she met a guy named Mark. He quickly became her best friend. At first, Jake didn't see anything wrong with this, but his concerns began to grow when Sarah told him that Mark had started comparing himself to him. Jake felt something was off about this guy. He tried to talk to Sarah, but she always shut down the topic, dismissing his worries with the words, "We're just friends." Despite his insecurity, Jake tried to trust her. He saw many red flags that made him doubt her, but each time he found excuses for her behavior, trying to maintain peace in their relationship. In 2023, Jake moved to another city, located just 100 kilometers from his hometown. Sarah often came to his place on weekends to spend time together. She cooked his favorite meals, they watched movies, and they explored new places. He cherished these moments when it was just the two of them, and believed their bond was strong enough to overcome any distance or challenges. He tried to suppress his insecurity and believed that his relationship with Sarah was strong enough. On a weekend in 2024, when Sarah came to visit him again, Jake felt an inexplicable sense of unease. Something inside told him that something was wrong. While Sarah was in the restroom, He took her phone and opened her chat with Mark. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, and his hands trembled as he searched for key words like kiss, naked, and boobs. His eyes caught a message from Mark, "Your boobs are perfect." Panic washed over Jake, and his body began to shake. He felt a lump in his throat, and it became difficult for him to breathe. He continued reading, "I loved when you sat on my face." Jake's entire world collapsed. It became hard for him to breathe, and his mind went completely blank. After reading these messages, Jake didn't know how to react. His mind was completely empty. He felt betrayed, hollowed out, and utterly destroyed. The world he had built with Sarah over 9 years fell apart in an instant. Eventually, they broke up. However, more than a year has passed, and Jake still can't recover. Despite knowing he needs to move on, he can't forget what happened. The memories and images haunt him, causing panic attacks. The pain hasn't gone away, and Jake suffers from it every single day. He still sees visions of what they did, based on those chats. A year after their breakup, Jake is still suffering from the pain and betrayal. The panic attacks have become less frequent, but the visions of what they did have not disappeared. He is trying to find a way to cope with this pain, hoping that someday he can heal his wounds and find peace. His story is a reminder of how one mistake can destroy everything that was built over years.
In the suburban landscape of America, where every house is a fortress and every perfectly manicured lawn hides its own secrets, there lived a family that seemed to have it all. Emily was a model wife and mother of 2, whose life appeared flawless on the surface. To outsiders, she and her husband, Adam, were the perfect couple. They were celebrating their 14th anniversary, raising children, and seemed to be the embodiment of the American dream. However, behind this facade lay a secret that could destroy everything. It all started when Emily decided to get rid of an old chair. She gave it away for free to a neighbor, a married man named David. Initially, it seemed like a simple neighborly transaction, but soon the messages between them grew into something more. David began to compliment Emily, comparing her to a famous actress. Instead of putting a stop to it, Emily used his flattery. She masterfully manipulated him, making him run errands, bring her furniture and other items she didn't even need. Adam, her husband, knew about her hoarding problem, but he had no idea she was using other people to indulge this weakness. The rising tension in their home became almost palpable. Emily was constantly deleting messages and acting mysteriously. When David invited her on dates, to the gym, to play squash, for coffee, Adam, looking at her phone, found out. Unbelievably, she hadn't blocked him, but was keeping him on a short leash. And all this time, while their house was full of relatives, she secretly arranged to meet David away from prying eyes. This moment was the point of no return. Adam couldn't take it anymore, and with shaking hands texted her to meet. When he confronted her, she responded as if nothing had happened. "It's not an affair, it's just friendly conversation," she said, without a hint of remorse in her voice. She even confessed that David wasn't the only one she was using. "I have many admirers, and I get favors from them," she said, with a nonchalant face, as if she were talking about the weather. One of them, as it turned out, was an 80-year-old grandfather. Adam stood stunned, his world crumbling. It became clear to him that her supposed religiousness, which she so often talked about, was just a mask. He saw a stranger, not his wife. Betrayal, lies, and manipulation, it all came to the surface. Emily, of course, apologized, sending a message saying she didn't know what she was thinking. But for Adam, it was too late. He felt hollowed out, as if she had taken not just a chair, but a piece of his soul. She had crossed a line. She had not only betrayed him, but also destroyed their family.